Hey, welcome to the Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. It's 14 days until March 13th, or Match Day. And I've put the most recent NAPLEX and MPJE scores on residencyhelp.com. I'll be helping with new letters of intent as best I can, but it's spring break, and I'll be with my family on vacation, helping with LOIs in the early morning before everybody gets up. You can look at residencyhelp.com to see if we're a good fit. Then email me at tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. That's Tony, thepharmacist@gmail.com. Make sure to join the residencyhelp.com email list. It's free, where each Friday during residency season and every few weeks outside of residency season, you'll get first dibs on my free books and resources and hear about the latest relevant podcasts and blogs. So first thing we're going to talk about is hedging risk. Hedging risk is something that is relatively unknown, I think, to most pharmacy students, so I'll address that. If you're graduating with 2 degrees, you know what I'm talking about. While the market for the PharmD degree is uncertain, some who can make a difference with a PharmD MBA or PharmD MPH or PharmD in a residency is hedging their risk. In the same way, pharmacy schools en masse are adding programs, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees to hedge against the reduction in PharmD applications and, of course, that revenue. In the same way, you might hedge the $75 to have me create a unique LOI template for Phase 2 when you end up matching anyway. But right now, you're a little stressed, but I assure you the stress of not matching is for some overwhelming. So what I learned in Phase 1 is that when we work together, what I'm really trying to do is take what you're doing and make it into a unique template that you can use for your other. This one is going to be up to 24 applications because in Phase 2, you're going to want to at least double the number of applications you make, so somewhere from 10 to 12 to closer to 18 to 24, because in Phase 1, you had a 1 in 2 chance. But in Phase 2, your chances are 1 in 13. But if you get an interview, then they go to 1 in 5. So your chances are much lower. But if you do a couple of things right, like get that application in on St. Patrick's Day morning, you're in good shape. So the issue is that you really want to start the LOI now, the CV now, because you may not be able to function when you need to function at your best. And having the LOI revision done is really, it's more about peace of mind than anything else. And there's only so many people I can help when 2,600 people get turned away from residency on the same day. So I encourage you to reach out to me to help you with your LOI if you want to make that hedge. Again, always better to do it beforehand when I can help you. And more importantly, you're not stressed, because I'm not stressed, but many times the student will be. So ideally, you do want to get that application in by St. Patrick's Day morning, but the true deadline is not until later, a few days later really, but with only 2 weeks to turn in the rank order list. Some sites close their applications in just a few days, so St. Patrick's Day ends up being the day if you want the best chance to match in Phase 2. Well, let's talk a little bit about NAPLEX scores and MPJE scores that just came out and how accreditation does and does not look at them and how these scores relate to you earning a residency interview and match. So NAPLEX scores and residency site rankings. The unwritten rule of NAPLEX and residency is that RPDs don't interview anyone from a school that is in the 70s or lower. There are, of course, exceptions, but the big issue is that a low NAPLEX in many ways invalidates the GPA that school provides. So while you might have a low NAPLEX school and a high GPA, it makes it look very bad. So let's say you got a 3.9 GPA from a school with a NAPLEX in the 60s and MPJE in the 70s. That's a significant risk that even if they take you on, you're not going to pass the exam and they're going to end up with somebody that can't work as a pharmacist. There are too many applicants to need to take that risk as an employer. Remember, RPDs answer to someone, and justifying taking someone from the bottom 20% NAPLEX school makes little sense in terms of risk. So let me elaborate a little bit. A bottom 10% NAPLEX is lower than 75%. And that's really confusing to most people because when they look at these scores, they think of them as grade percentages. 90 and above is an A, 80 and above is a B, 70 and above is a C. But when you look at the actual quartiles, a quartile is when you're at 1/4 of the way up. So the bottom quartile actually ends at 82.91%. So if your school got 82.91 or lower, you're actually in the bottom 25% of all pharmacy schools for your NAPLEX. What's crazy is that if you are below 90.86, you are in the bottom half. And I remember this happening at my high school where somebody who had like a 3.3 GPA was in the bottom 50% of his high school class. And that was a big deal because he couldn't get certain scholarships where they required him to be in the top half and things like that. And there were just so many people with so many A's. So the bottom half starts at 90.86. And the difference between the top 25% in that next group is only 3%. So at 93.75%, you're in the bottom, or you're in the second tier or second 25%. So when you look at NAPLEX scores, it's so misleading to think that 90s is great, 80s is okay, and 70s is, well, that's bad, but not terrible. But when you look at class rank, or school rank really, you are in the bottom 25% of all pharmacy schools if you're under 82.91%, let's just say 83%. And that means that there's no reason with this many applicants going to residency that they need to take that risk that you're going to be someone that doesn't pass the NAPLEX exam. So how many students is that, though? How many students are in the bottom 10%? And it's actually lower than 10%, so it's a little confusing, but the schools that are in the bottom 10% only have 7% of the graduating pharmacy students. However, if you look at the bottom 20%, that's an additional 1,500 students, so about 2,500 students total of the 13,869 who tried to take the NAPLEX on the first try. And so 18% of all pharmacy students are in the bottom 20% of those NAPLEX scoring schools. That's still a ton of students. And in general, it's just easier for an RPD to just say, look, we're just not even going to look at that 2,500. Plenty of other applicants out there. We don't need someone that comes from a school that has a 70 or 60 or 50 or whatever it is. And it's not because you're thinking, wait a minute, a 79 is like a C+. Well, no, 79%, even that 82.91% is still in the bottom quartile or bottom quarter of all the schools. So they're not eliminating you because you got a C. They're eliminating you because you're the bottom fifth of all pharmacy schools. Now, this whole argument against the new schools of pharmacy becomes kind of clear and apparent when you see that 62% of that bottom quartile, the bottom 25% of NAPLEX scoring schools, are newer schools that are less than 20 years old. So the majority of those in the very bottom are newer schools. So whatever recent criteria that accreditation board is using for passing schools from pre-candidate to accredited status does not seem to ensure the success of the school. So what do these school scores mean for a residency applicant this year? In this year, if your school had a big jump from the bottom 20% to outside of that range, and this includes 7 colleges of pharmacy, I'd consider contacting the RPD today if you did get an interview, because you can, in a sentence or two, let them know that you are hopefully part of a very different cohort, that 2018 group does not represent the 2019 group and the trend that your school is in, the upward trend. If you didn't get an interview and you're in these schools, I would consider going into phase 2 as your college's 2018 NAPLEX scores, however unfair, may have been a significant factor in your not getting an interview at all. The 7 schools that dug themselves out of the bottom 20% include Manchester from 69.70 to 91.67, South College from 68.29 to 87.84, Mercer from 76.55 to 93.75, Chapman from 71.23 to 85.71, Xavier from 75 to 82.91, and Florida A&M from 75 to 82.79. On the flip side, 1,400 students are in schools that went from outside the bottom 20% to the bottom 20%. And you best hope that RPD doesn't see that, and that the exhaustion of the match process and having to make that change the day before rankings today or tomorrow is something that they won't do. You can thank the class of 2018 for your good fortune that you got an interview, because the class of 2019 has really messed things up for future classes, and those some 1,400 students are going to be in a lot of trouble. So if you're thinking that the interview went well, then all of a sudden you don't get a match, I would consider using your PCOA scores as leverage to show you're qualified. Because the issue is the GPA, or a high GPA from a school with a poor NAPLEX again, lacks credibility. And some of you are stuck with no grades at all because you're pass-fail school, which hurts your chances more often than not against someone with a high GPA. So look at your NAPLEX scores and put yourself in the RPD shoes. How can I show that I'm not a student at risk for failing the NAPLEX? Ultimately, I believe an RPD is interested in minimizing the risk of having their resident fail the NAPLEX or MPJE would want to look at both scores. This is dumb, but if you add the 2019 percentages from NAPLEX and MPJE together, which is completely not a thing, you can't even do it in Idaho or Arkansas or California, the University of Toledo comes to the top, followed by Nebraska, Kentucky, Houston, and Duquesne. And at the bottom are the usual cast of colleges, but there are some surprises, but I won't mention those. So shout out to Eric Geyer of the Political Pharmacist podcast, who is a Toledo grad. Good job, you guys, on the NAPLEX and MPJE together. So let's talk about what you can do to make sure you do pass the NAPLEX once you get into residency. First, most people use the RX prep book at the door as a doorstop until about a month before graduation, when all of a sudden their antenna light up about the NAPLEX and MPJE. That creates significant stress. What will reduce the stress is one of two things, in my opinion. One, just creating a plan for how you're going to go over the individual chapters will ease some of the procrastination feeling. And then actually physically cutting the RX prep book into smaller pieces as small as a chapter. You can take it to Staples, they'll rebind it for you. This is for whatever reason. It helps a lot to have just kind of a skinny one. Eric Christensen and I created a few pharmacotherapy audiobooks you can find and may be able to get for free, as Audible usually gives you the first 1 or 2 audiobooks free, even if you don't stick with them. So you can find those books at residencyhelp.com and click on free books to find the links. Then I also have that pharmacology book, 18 Hours of Review, which is memorizing pharmacology questions, answers, and rationales, books 1 through 7. And that I know I have a number of free codes on the website there. Let's just talk briefly about closing pharmacy schools, because there's always a lot of chatter about this, especially around NAPLEX time. How can schools with those NAPLEX scores stick around, and what are they doing? So many think that why are these schools still around if they post such low NAPLEX score? And this has a lot to do with accreditation. The accreditation board will, do something as strong as withdrawing accreditation is really unusual, but they did do it recently to a school of pharmacy, who now I believe has a teach-out program, which means that they'll teach the rest of the students and then graduate, but obviously very tough for them to get residency with that kind of hanging over their head. What's more likely to happen is it's simply not going to be financially reasonable to keep a PharmD program around. As I've mentioned before, applications and applicants are way down as of February. That's about 2,000 students, but it may change next month. They may have a comeback. I don't know. But this doesn't mean a school will close if they have very few PharmD students. They may have diversified other programs, may not rely on that tuition revenue as much as others. Every 10 pharmacy students brings in, on average, $1.4 million in tuition revenue over their 4 years, and that's a lot to say goodbye to. So we're seeing micro pharmacy schools with really low enrollments. The newest College of Pharmacy has 25 students. that's about as many as many students as my daughter's third grade class has. But at $60,000 in tuition for each student, not the third grade class. That's free. That comes with our taxes. Times 25 students, that's still $1.5 million per year. $4.5 million over 3 years they'll go to school. So when you open a 3-year school, you get that extra bump because you don't save them really any money. You just add the tuition in for summers, and then you can get it in that calendar year right away in July rather than waiting till September. But the NAPLEX scores show declines in enrollment, but nothing like what you'll see if the numbers from the entering class of 2020 to 2021 continue. I'll keep you updated on that. So I kind of digress. In short, best advice I think is to get practical work experience in school, whether community and hospital or other, and find another credential to add to the PharmD and go after residency if that's your thing. Starting next week, we'll do a bit of a countdown to match day and talk about the resources you will and won't need each way. I'll make my book, Crushing the Phase 2 Residency Match, available free on match day for those who need it on my website, residencyhelp.com. So have a good weekend. As always, TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with me, or a lot of people like to just hit me up on Messenger on Facebook if we're already friends, or sometimes I don't see you if we're not friends. And then LinkedIn, you can find me at TonyPharmD. So losing my voice a little bit, so I'll end there. But next week we will start that countdown towards match day. Hey, and if you're interested in learning more about the residency interview process, go to residencyhelp.com or amazon.com or audible.com. and pick out 100 strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales.